Oh, what's going on with this? Sorry, I don't know where's the video. Come on, video. What are you... Okay, but the video isn't on. See, you can't test this first. You can't test this first. Sorry. Why isn't the video on? I'll get it here. Come on. What is going on here? Sorry. Oh, there we go. There we go. Jeez. Little drama there. 1 second. Do this. Let's see. Make this down. This is so high. YouTube is such a mess. The back end. 1 second. Let me do one more thing here. All right. Sorry about that. YouTube is such a mess with the back end. You can't audition. You can't rehearse it first. You have to just fly. You can't even see what the studio looks like. You just have to start. And then if your camera's not working, you got to figure it out on the fly. Anyways. Okay. A couple people here. And we'll be starting here in a few minutes. Okay, so let's start with this class today on the evolutionary principles of the planets as seen through the zodiac signs. And we'll start with a brief meditation at first. We want to take a few deep breaths and come into the present moment. You can always, and you should really, bring yourself into the present many times throughout the day. When you close your eyes, the energy goes inward, and then you just allow the breath to take you deeper. So inhale, and you feel the energy become light, and then you exhale, and you sink down into the heart and deeper relaxation, surrender. So the inhale is that energy of life. Exhale is that surrender into the heart. And that trust in the inner world that's always there behind everything in the outer world. So this is where great clarity emerges instead of all the clutter and loose ends. So take a few breaths, inhale and exhale. So I'll say 2 chants. First is to thank the teachers, the great gurus of this material. And the second is to unite the energy between teachers and students so that we can learn correctly. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bonatu Sarviryan Gharvavahai Tejasvinyavri Tamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Okay, so we have a few people here. And if people want to say hi, they can. The chat is open there, the live chat. Let me... So this is going to be very succinct and straightforward, teaching those who have gotten my certification course before, or those who have been studying and listening to astrology for a long time, the structure of the things that will be talked about, but going over things with more depth and with a more profound awareness many times leads to a deeper application. I go over these things all the time. This is why I teach them over and over again, because I know, and I've been I wrote my first book on this stuff in 20 years ago, more than that, and I still go back and get more depth. So again, when people, when I offer classes like this and it's not even $30 for like 7, 8 hours of class time, and people are, oh, I already know all that. It's like, I get it, but because we've heard it a few times and think, our mind is ready to jump to the next thing. So even what I said in that meditation about, going inward and getting the depth of things, not the surface of things. You already have access to the first class that I taught, where I went over the evolutionary processes of the sun and the moon and the 7 channels of karma. Again, even understanding this concept of what karma really is and what these 7 distinct channels of karma are. And not just that that's what karma is and that it's flowing through the 7 distinct channels, but then again, what those channels are, not just, right, sun, moon, Mars, Mercury. Okay, but what is the depth of each one? What is the evolutionary process of each one? That is what we do when we go back and revisit and do things over. Just like with our karma isn't like, okay, you do it once and then you never do it again. All we're doing in life is doing things over again. We're always given the chance to do it over again. It's not like we get one chance to do something or we learn it once and then, all right, well, that's it. I already know it and I have nothing else to learn about it. Think about everything you do in your life. Think about your, again, your relationships, your work, your interactions with everything. The more you go back, the more depth is there. And in fact, that's why you're really good at certain things. You're really good at certain things, and you're really good at the things that you really love. So that's why, again, going back and doing them again is actually also just a sign that of how much you love the thing, right? Because you want to go back and examine it again and like feel that thing alive in you. And so that's really kind of the spirit of this kind of examination. I've taught on planet signs and houses so many times. It's like, why is Sam teaching this again? I've already heard this a million times. Yeah, I get you've heard it a million times. We've all heard many things a million times. Oh, right, I'm the spirit. I'm the soul who's incarnated with karma. Right. Okay, I got it. Okay, now what's the next thing? Like, we hear things all the time. Do we really know what they are? So again, the more we examine things and apply, then we apply them more. And so we're going to start where we left off at the last, or at the first class in the series, which was the one that I did on. It was a free class with, and it's funny because there's like 280 people or something that came to that. It was a free class, 280 people. And barely 40, 45, it was like 20, not even 40 people would come to this examination. So I commend you for seeing the value in it. Commend you in seeing the value in it, and seeing, yes, there's definitely a lot of depth here that's worth like, going over again or really understanding, because it's, again, as much as I've taught this and learned this in my life, this examination is an opportunity to go deeper into something that you, quote, already know. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with those planets and those 7 channels of karma, those evolutionary processes. I'm not going to go over them again today because it's already there, right? And so again, you have that there for you. But we're just going to pick up where we left off with those evolutionary processes and put them in the signs today. And then once we have an ascendant, a rising sign, those signs then become houses. And so really going deeper into this really basic but profound matrix is very helpful, and particularly if we can streamline it. So what I've done here is, make some very streamlined ways of understanding the signs as well, because that's one of the things that happen when we teach it and we learn it and we know it in more depth, is we can distill the essence of the thing down into a more focused structure. So even just the idea that the signs are how the planets feel to us. Now, again, it might sound like, oh, Sam, that's so simple. Yeah, well, why doesn't everybody say it? And the houses are how they get applied. Okay, and again, I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying that that's a expression of like this, just distilling this stuff down into like that environment. The sign is the environment where that evolutionary process is operating. How this evolutionary, how this moon, which has this evolutionary process, psychological comfort, emotional attachment, worldly connection, that evolutionary process is now feels this way in this lifetime. So if you're talking about your chart or whatever, then these evolutionary processes feel a certain way to us. The process is there regardless of how it feels. This is the other reason why you have to make the distinctions, and why I make these distinctions. So again, it's very important for those of you who study, have gotten a lot of courses or whatever it might be, that one of the reasons why it's important to even look at it this way is because, as I discussed last week with the evolutionary processes and whatnot, regardless of where the planets are, regardless of anything else, that's what's going on with them. That sun is that evolutionary process of the sun is happening because it's transcendent of the house it's in, the sign it's in, the house it rules. Those things show how it's going to show up in this lifetime. But those forces are outside of that. This is why, again, I always make these things very clear. And the reason we want to go back and re-examine them is because I know they get muddled together. I'm constantly having to do this with very advanced students where they kind of forget that these planets are these 7 forces of karma. Again, you heard me say it. Now it's like, okay, right, now I get it. Again, understand they are transcendent of this lifetime, of your kids and how you feel in this life and all of that. They are beyond that. In this lifetime, they feel to you a certain way based on the sign they're in. That's how Mars feels to you in this lifetime. But you've been with Mars for every lifetime you've had. In this lifetime, it feels this way to you. Okay? Now it feels to you in this lifetime. Based on the rising sign, then it's going to rule a couple different houses. And then that feeling of that Mars is then going to show up in this area of your life, the worldly life. Those are all very separate categories. How it feels to you has nothing to do with what it's going to do. How it feels to you has to do with the sign that it's in. For example, my Mars was in Leo. Okay, so I already know an enormous amount of information. If someone has Mars in Leo, regardless of the houses it rules and the house it's in, Mars, that pure channel that has the evolutionary process that we talked about last week, that has this evolutionary process, fighting to strengthen physical bodies, surmounting external challenges, to courageously facing their deepest self. That pure channel, which is transcendent of this lifetime, when it's in Leo, it's going to feel this way to the person. I already know that it's the pure channel, that's this thing evolving in the person. In this lifetime, it feels this way to them, fighting for, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we're going to talk about today. How do these things feel? What are these different domains of feeling? And that environment, that emotional environment, that psychological environment. And then based on the ascendant, it's going to rule different areas of life. And many times as I'm saying these things, I have people that come to mind, with one of the case studies, you see I have this Mars in Leo. This is my chart. I have a couple friends. It's funny how many students I've had who have Mars in Leo, right? Again, I mean, we have Mars in a lot of different places, but funny how many I know. For me, again, and how much commonality is there just with that feeling of how that thing feels, that energy. If you're Scorpio, that Mars is your ruling planet and your 6th house ruler, and it's in your 10th house. So again, we're going to focus more on the houses and like the house that the planet is in tomorrow, not necessarily that what it rules. But again, these are all different things. They're all separate. So again, that's why it's so important when you start to understand these things, all of the preconceptions we have about the basics. I know what all the signs are. I know what the houses are. I know what the planets are. And it all gets muddled together because someone would look at something like this and they say, okay, Jupiter, Rahu, and Cancer. All right. And again, realizing that Jupiter is that pure channel. That's this part of the person. Regardless of the sign, house, whether it's exalted. Again, those of you who study with me have heard me say many times that we make too much out of that, of those gross observations. Yes, it's there. But all of those things, like we learn to identify, it's exalted, it's debilitated, it's that. What about Rahu? Oh, like we look at all of these things that are affecting. And of course, those things are important. But if we don't have a sequence, a priority and sequence, then all of a sudden we're confused by all the things we think we already know. You have to be able to go back to what the thing is originally, which is where we started last week. First, you need to understand, and not just that they're channels of karma, but what is karma? We don't even really know what that is most of the time. It's like, oh, okay. Is it karmic or something, right? So you got to go back and break it apart and then put it back together. And that's really what this weekend is about relative to that structure of planet signs and houses. It's not just a sort of indulgent review. Like we're not just, okay, we're going to talk about that again. We're going to break these things down from their beginning, like we did the first class last week. And if you didn't get it and you just signed up, because some people, again, even though they've heard about this for a month, they just did it 2 days ago at the last minute. So you do have access to the first class in this, which was the planets, the evolutionary process of the planets. Go back and watch it because I explain what is karma, what is the karmic frame, the evolutionary process of all of these things. I explain all of that. 1 second. Yeah, in fact, here, I just thought I'd bring it up. I wasn't, but this was the manual from that. So again, those of you who didn't get this the last time, I explain all of this. And then we went through the evolutionary process of all the planets, and there was another document as well. Because we need to start with that. First, what is karma? What is our embodied, these transcendent forces? And those who have my certification course knows that that's where we start. The certification course, we start with that, and we start with the planets and their signs, because the planets are, the signs are also an extension, an expression of the planets that rule them. And what I've done here today in this manual is break those things out with some key notes here, some keywords. I'm going to take a drink. If people, of course, the question, where do we find these documents, manuals? They're in the, they were taught live. They weren't sent or uploaded. I'll upload them. I'll paste a link to them. They were the manuals from the first class. But let me take another drink here. So, but again, whether you have the manuals uploaded or whatever to look at, they were part of the whole class, where they were an outline for a class. So we'll just start here with this. So I've broken it down into the positive and negative traits of the 12 astrology signs. Each of the 12 signs carries its own set of strengths and weaknesses. Here's a quick breakdown of their positive and negative attributes. The positive and negative traits connect to the evolutionary process of the planet and signs to reveal a deeper psychology in life. So, again, it's also really valuable to me, again, as someone who has been doing meditation and spiritual practice and all of this for a very long time, to understand that you are not your psychology. And again, it sounds insulting sometimes, and you are not just your psychology and your emotions. And again, it sounds pedantic or lecturing, and I don't mean it to be, but everyone acts like they are their psychology. Like, oh yeah, I'm this person based on, I feel this way. That's me. I'm this person with these feelings who has this psychology. And again, I understand it's very deep. And it's the same way with me. And we're going to be talking about it. Like, again, the Mars and Leo feels this way to you is very different than saying, I'm this person. It feels this way to you in this lifetime is the correct way to say it. It's important to understand the correct way to say it. If you don't understand it, then you're not going to be able to see beyond it. And it's all people ever want from astrology is, who am I? And again, we often ascribe the negative, connotations. Well, who am I beyond the karma? Like, the karma winds up being like the bad thing. And the karma isn't really the bad thing. It's just your nature in this lifetime. So first, again, we got to know what is the nature beyond this lifetime. And we can see that through those 7 channels of karma, the evolutionary processes of those 7 channels. And then in this lifetime, it feels this way to you. So that's all your psychology is. Your psychology can be easily understood as how these 7 energies, those are the ones you have. You're not a unicorn that has others. None of us are. We're all doing the same, 7 things based on these planets. And in this lifetime, it feels this way to you. That's what the psychology is. But if you can't step behind it and be able to observe it, and you're like, oh no, this is me, I'm this thing, then there's no freedom. There's no liberation. There's no potential, because you're just now reacting based on your psychology. Everything is your psychology. And this is what most of us are most of the time, including me, until and unless you introduce presence, like here, like I explained in the first class. If we don't introduce some kind of presence, which we can become present all the time, like I said at the beginning of this class, breath, stillness, awareness, peace, and your energy comes back to the source. And you live in that domain that's not just your psychology. So again, I'm being very intentional to explain these things because they're very much a missing piece. Even if you study with me all the time, they hear me say this stuff forever. And it's still like I'll do their readings or whatever, and they're still as if they've never heard any of this. So again, we all need the repetition, including me. Again, I'm not saying I'm above it. I need to do it all the time too. We all do. The karma, the incarnation is very thick. And, when I get out and live my life, my life and my nature in this lifetime can be understood by, and my psychology, you can understand my psychology by looking at this. This is my psychology. This is how all this feels to me. All these Gemini planets, it feels like that. Again, I said that Mars and Leo. That Mars channel has this feeling of Leo. That Saturn channel has that feeling of Capricorn. The Jupiter channel has that feeling of Pisces. All these channels, Mercury, Venus, Sun. Again, we haven't talked about Rahu, Ketu because they're more modifying forces, but they all feel like Gemini, right? But I also know that's just my psychology underneath, and I'm not just my psychology. Just like you're not, your psychology was defined by the karmas in this lifetime, past lifetimes, but it's better to just keep it in this lifetime. Your childhood and all of that karma that you incarnated in was all to give you the psychological outlook and framework that you have that is shown by the chart. There were no mistakes, no matter what the parents did and all their flaws. And boy, I had my share of flawed parents, just like everybody. You could see in this chart that that's what was supposed to happen. I was supposed to incarnate in that environment to fix me in this psychology, in this lifetime. And then that's where we start. We start from that place. We start from this place with this pattern. And then within this pattern, we evolve. These processes evolve. It's our nature, our true nature as spirit, to evolve these processes within this matrix. My moon in Libra, the evolutionary process of this moon, psychological comfort and attachment to worldly connection as mother, caretaker to embodying the divine mother sattva and love for all. That channel in this lifetime for me evolves through this Libra energy, for example. So again, I'm being very emphatic before we go through all of the signs for you to understand how we're moving through this. And again, when you understand it, it's like revolutionary, and it can take your awareness, even of what you're looking at with charts, to the next level. Just again, these framework shifts, because this is something that's very primal, very much at the beginning. And especially once people start learning astrology, they think they've understood a lot more, or they're like bypassing this. And many times the thing that's missing are these very fundamental connections. Like a doctor can focus on your heart beating and all of these things, but that's actually very, very sophisticated, right? If you have a problem on the cellular level and your cells aren't being, like red blood cells aren't being created well, or you have a problem with, like cancer cell or something on the cellular level, the building block level is going to undermine everything else. And if you have a problem there, nothing's going to work. It's going to destroy the whole organism. This is kind of like the same thing. This is like that kind of DNA of astrology. If you don't really understand what the planets really are, what karma really is, what our psychology really is, and then how it shows up in our life, then you're making assumptions and trying to interpret something, again, that you don't even understand. And this is what happens. Or if you're getting readings or you want to get advice in this regard, or even if you just want to know the nature of life and understand that you're not your psychology. Psychology is part of your karma in this world. But even your karma in this world, this body, you're not this body. This body belongs to the world. Your psychology belongs to this world of karma that's wrapped around your pure soul nature, which is not of this world. It's transcendent. So with all that in mind, let's go through these signs as being part of how these 7 channels of karma find themselves wrapped up in how it feels, the feeling of that karma. And again, of course, everyone has a chart, right? You all have, and you probably know your own chart as well. And you, again, the exercise is to, put these evolutionary principles, each one of, like, as I go through, if you have planet in Aries, think, oh yeah, that evolutionary process of this planet or that planet is, in that sign. And again, you don't have to do it now. I'll upload the manual again. So I don't want to stop and do it now. I'll have it for tomorrow as well, because I have to actually upload them somewhere online, and then but you should just understand the, oops, no, it's going to do that, forget it. But just understand the general nature of the planets. If you have, any planets in these signs, they're evolving within this matrix. So as you see, for each one of these signs, I have these terms that are really encapsulating the nature of the sign. For example, with the fire signs, I put frustration. So again, this is the kind of environment, and I'm going to flesh it out. But in general, I've put a kind of key motivation and also obstacle for the signs, because again, these are our psychology, whether we like to see it or not, is an obstacle in life. In many ways, everything is. We have incarnated with this karma, and we're trying to see beyond that obstruction of the ego. This is what the ego is. The ego is the aggregate of all of this, of how our karma feels to us, and then what we're doing about it. That's really an aggregate called the ego. And again, that's why I say we're all completely wrapped up in it. We're wrapped up in it, in our ego of how it all feels to us, and then what we're doing and all of that stuff. So with the fire signs, I put like a certain frustration, right? With the earth signs, there's an attachment. Again, an attachment is a neutral word. That we need positive attachment, but it's also bondage. There's an attachment, again, to the material. With the air signs, there's like movement. Again, it's kind of a neutral term. Movement is, we have movement, but it can be too much. And with the water signs, it's sensitivity, right? And so for each one of these, it's a little bit different, but I've tried to surround and encapsulate these 12 astrology signs. So any planets there are going to be in that kind of psychological environment. And again, this is why I'm also highlighting the sort of obstruction or the obstacle of what we're contending with the planet in the sign. So Aries, personal frustration and restlessness. Aries is a very personal, like, I'm the important one, because it's the first sign. It's like being born. Here I am. I'm powerful. and I'm the important one, right? It's ruled by Mars, which is wanting to win and survive. So personal frustration and restlessness is kind of the nature of Mars. There's a lot of, Aries. There's a lot of personal growth with Aries, very much about personal growth, but it can be very competitive and, again, like all the signs, we lose ourselves in the worldly expression of it. But the psychology is this, any planet in Aries is like, it could be black or white. I'm right, others are wrong. My focus is the important one. You want to know where the importance is? It's right here. It's like, and again, this can be very much with Aries and Leo. They're quite similar, but Aries even more so about the personal individual. And again, it's not a positive or negative. It can be either one. The positive is bold, courageous, energetic. The negative is impulsive, impatient, aggressive. By the way, these were generated originally through AI, and then I go back and tweak them to make sure they're right. AI does a lot of good stuff. You can quickly generate things. I just let people know when I do use those tools that they can generate a nice outline, and then I go back and correct it. But especially these positive, negative was originally there, and then I went back and tweaked it. But I like to make sure to let people know that. So again, these positive, negative traits are like universal. And, the zodiac signs are universal frameworks. They're not just, unique to Vedic. This is actually where Western and Vedic astrology overlapped, what's called horoscopic astrology of the zodiac and whatnot. So, but any planets in Aries is going to have that bold, courageous, energetic. And again, it's very much about the person, personal frustration, restlessness, which is saying, no, I need to keep growing. And in the highest sense, though, when it becomes more reflective, we have that courage to go inward and face our own weakness. The sun itself is exalted in Aries, where we follow that Atman, that pure vision to the self. In the negative sense, Aries, again, is impulsive, impatient, aggressive. And usually what you can see is that the positive is going to be something that's more internal and connected to consciousness and spirit, and the negative is going to be something that's very material and externalized. Again, like with Aries, it's a contest. Negative is impulsive, impatient, aggressive. Nothing's fast enough. You're wrong, I'm right. And the aggression. This is just the nature of Mars. Scorpio will have the same thing, but it's more emotional, psychological. So this range of these emotional, this range of positive, negative is the emotional kind of range and vibration of planets in Aries. So you wind up with Saturn being debilitated there, the sun being exalted there. So it means that the sun, which is our soul nature, has its highest force in Aries, because Aries, we just trust it and do it. We don't question it. It's like, I'm right, so I'm going to do it. So again, it really supports the sun, where we're following that vision. It debilitates Saturn, where we're trying to be careful and calculated and say, okay, now be careful, be careful. That's what Saturn is saying, be careful. Aries is like, no, I'm just going to do it. And then we destroy what Saturn is trying to do. In that psychological environment undermines what Saturn is trying to do in our life, which is survive and commit to things for a long time, right? Saturn is where we're fearful of fighting and battling and destroying things, literally like afraid of fighting and whatnot, because we're trying to be safe. So again, this also gives an overview when the planets have exalted and debilitated tendencies. We can learn quite a bit from it. So Taurus is that sensual attachment. I'm gonna come back. Yeah, my mom had Mars in Aries, so I have some overall case study charts here. And yeah, my mom had a lot of courage. My mom was one of the first groups of women to get divorced in the early 70s here in America. It wasn't even legal for women to have credit cards or all kinds of stuff. You needed your husband's permission. But my mom had the courage to break out of a bad marriage back then because of the way my father was abusive and all that stuff, and went and did it anyway and found a way to do it and went out and got a job and did all this stuff. She had a lot of courage. My mom had Mars in Aries. So again, Mars is the ruler of Aries. So if it's important enough, and she has Scorpio ascendant, so it's also was in the 6th house. So it was her ruling planet. So as much as my mom was also a very sweet, kind, in fact, even really quite spiritual woman, she was a tiger. I mean, she had a lot of courage naturally. So that Mars was, again, when planets are in their own signs, they can find the right thing to fight for. So it has a lot of intelligence. So Taurus is sensual because it's ruled by Venus. Again, personal is Mars, sensual is Venus, attachment, earth sign, and pleasure. Taurus is very much about the pleasure part of Venus, whereas Libra is the harmony part of Venus. But Taurus is very much about the pleasure part of Taurus or of Venus. So again, you see in these explanations, I have like the element. I have a quality of the ruling planet, which Venus is sensual, and the real motivation. So planets in Taurus, again, this sensual attachment and pleasure. So again, it's positive, can be very dependable, patient, grounded. And again, it's because of these qualities. Because if I'm dependable, patient, and grounded, it will bring me pleasant, sensual things. I'm attached to things that are I'm dependable, so people will stay attached to me, and it's pleasurable. It feels good. It's nice. I want to be surrounded by nice things. But in the negative, stubborn, materialistic, resistant to change. This is like the difficult quality of Taurus is that I'd rather have a dependable connection, even if it's an unpleasant one. I can find pleasure and something to be happy with in any situation. See, this is one of the psychological qualities of Taurus. Taurus is great at enduring difficulty. First of all, because they're ruled by Venus, so they can find pleasure and happiness in the smallest thing. It's like if it's 95% bad, but there's 5% pleasure, I'll hang out for the 5% because I don't want to change. Because I get this 5% pleasure, but if I change, maybe I won't get any. So it can get kind of distorted with Taurus. Again, this is when we're unevolved, but this can be the negative psychology of Taurus, is where we're more attached to stability and structure than our growth and positive change. But again, in the very positive side, Taurus has this, patient, dependable, grounded, solid, nature. They take a while to do things. Again, I always say one of the things to understand is this mentality that's slow and long, like the size of the signs are very powerful. Like it's a slow to change, slow to start something new, and slow to change once they start. So it might take them a long time to start a relationship or to start a job, but then once they're in it for a long time. It's what's called a long sign. That's the size, is long. So the moon is exalted here because the grounded nature, the nature of being solid, is the part that is exalting to the moon. Because the moon is where we're changing emotions. So that stable, dependable, grounded, patient energy really emerges and supports the moon, right? But again, even if you get you want to understand, even when you get the exalted planet, it's not just the positive. There, the negative also comes forth. So even when planets are in these dignities, exalted sun, it's exalted in Aries. Yes, so it can show those higher qualities emerge, but the negative ones are also there too. But when they're in those higher dignities, there's more intelligence about the thing. Usually, we can see, if we have spiritual practices and whatnot, we can see through the negative better when the planet is in those better dignities. So Taurus, any planets in Taurus has that feeling. So again, if it's Mars there, then it'll have these feelings. But again, with Mars, stubborn, material, resistant to change, dependable, patient, grounded, again, it will bring that energy to Mars, even though Mars is Mars is wanting to do this. So again, you want to see these things as very neutral at first before you start getting into, but is it good or bad? But first, really just try to see it with neutrality. Now, again, I'm explaining dignities and stuff, but even something like, well, what about Mars there? Is that good or bad that it's there? Doesn't it kind of make Mars behave? Because Mars, you don't want to get into this kind of thinking. And by the way, I'm sure you've heard it all the time from astrologers, particularly like, well, Mars is one of the bad ones. So, in Taurus, it makes him behave a little bit better. These kinds of things. When I hear it, I just absolutely cringe because it's nonsense. You don't want Mars to behave better by becoming neutered or by becoming, afraid or too whatever. That's not the point. There's nothing wrong with what Mars is doing. Mars is destroying the things that we need to destroy, and you don't want him in an environment where he's afraid to act. Because then that part of us that Mars is trying to liberate is going to get stuck, right? By the way, I'm not saying that's what happens when it's in Taurus, but it goes back to what I said at the beginning, where you have to see these as segregated forces. Mars is that evolutionary process of fighting the good fight and destroying what needs to be destroyed, regardless of what sign it's in. So when you see that it's in Taurus, then you're going to know that it has this psychology. It's in that environment where it might feel afraid to destroy something because it wants to preserve attachment and things like that. And it's going to do that. It's going to have that psychology. So I know when I see Mars there, that the person, there might be a kind of shrinking from the battle. And you might say, well, isn't that good because we don't want to battle? It's bad to battle, right? No, it's not bad to battle. It's bad to battle the wrong thing. And what happens when Mars is in these Venus signs is it leads to frustration building up because we're not showing up for those fights in the moment, which is what Mars wants to do. Instead, we let them build up because we're trying to preserve some kind of stability, and then it blows up because it's going to blow up. Mars is still going to try to do that. So it can lead to frustration. In the sky right now, we have Jupiter there. Right? Jupiter is that evolving process of that capacity for expansion and growth, the main planet of growth from excessive material growth and attachment, which is kind of what it is in Taurus, to over-reliance upon man-made worldly philosophies, to the highest universal wisdom is the evolutionary process of Jupiter. So when he gets in one of these sensual attached places with Jupiter, again, it's not like it's bad, but you just got to know what it is. Now we're trying to evolve in a very material way, materialistic way. So we got to be careful of that. But we have to bring it into that environment. If that's where it is in your natal chart, then Jupiter is going to feel like that to you. It's going to feel like, okay, my relationship with the transcendent and cosmic is a very earthy, practical thing. Okay, that's what it is. That's how it feels. You want to try to avoid the judgments around, oh, it's bad, oh, watch it. But you have to advise the person and say, okay, it's going to feel this way to you. So be careful not to just expand materially, and it can lead to things like greed or finding in hope and expansion just in stuff of this world. Because Jupiter is trying to transcend and evolve beyond just this world. So you need to instead take those transcendent philosophies and bring them into your daily habits, routines, diet, all that stuff. And then once it happens, the person can be very committed because that's the nature of Taurus. So again, you want to try to see these things with neutrality, but also understand that when you do see these things show up, I've done entire classes on the dignity. This is what's called the dignity. It's real. You're going to see that that's going to, again, we're very attached to our psychology. The things I said at the beginning about you're not your psychology, you're not, again, I'm saying it because we are it very much feels like that to us. All of these planetary energies feel very much like the sign they're in. And we are very much attached to it. It's like, but it feels that way to me. That's how it feels to me. Right, I get it. But remember, you're not just the psychology. That's the karma in this lifetime with that energy is that feeling, that psychological feeling in this lifetime. But if we're just, again, that's not your whole identity. So then we move into, let's keep going here. Whoops, go back. Let me move this over. So then we get into Gemini. We have intellectual movement and enjoyment. Intellectual, of course, that's actually related to Mercury. Movement is related to air, and enjoyment is also just a quality of Mercury, particularly through Gemini. For Virgo, as you see, it's intellectual attachment, which was the earth sign, and structure because of that earth. And Mercury likes to create that structure in Virgo. In Gemini, he likes to create enjoyment, intellectual movement, which is Gemini because of the air. So in a positive way, it's versatile, curious, communicative, very good words. In the negative, it's indecisive, scattered, superficial. Could also put stimulated. There's a lot that you could put, but these are good keywords to prompt us. So again, with Gemini, it's ruled by Mercury and it's air sign. So again, planets in Gemini, there are a few things to really focus on. There's this quality of wanting to understand and comprehend. Again, the signs get their origin from the planets that rule them. They're meaningless without understanding that. Aries has no meaning without Mars. Taurus has no meaning without Venus, right? They're the ones that rule that aspect of life. Gemini, irrelevant without understanding Mercury, which is to try to figure things out, understand how they work, how are things put together, what does it mean? And the curiosity to explore and want to understand and then communicate about it, particularly in Gemini. Virgo is a different kind of communication, but it's also communicating. But Gemini especially. And Gemini is fast. It's air. It takes all of these ideas, brings them together quickly. Again, I'm a real good example of Gemini, personified. As you see, I have all these planets in Gemini here. So I'm a good example of it. With all those planets there, you could see. And again, there could be tangents and things like that where, because the mind is going very quickly, say this and then it'd be like, oh, and by the way, blah, 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 because the mind is going in a lot of directions. If it's not focused, it can be indecisive and scattered and superficial. You can see that. If I'm not focused on what I'm doing, right? If things aren't in play, then the Gemini energy can just be focused all over the place. And even so, as I'm communicating, it can stay focused. But then in life in general, planets there can be too, scattered. You get, let's say you get the moon there, right? The moon, which is about feeling, and the feelings are scattered, right? The feeling of Gemini is this thing, that thing, this thing, there's this, there's that, like the curious child. So you can see how that can really disrupt, Jupiter, which is about what's the point? What's the purpose? Well, this is that, this, that, wanting to just explore and play with a lot of things is very much Gemini. But we also know the value of play to actually bring intelligence once we get serious about the thing we're playing with, because we can play with a lot of things and we can play very seriously. And then we can really learn. And when there's love and devotion and discrimination and intelligence, then that curiosity can reveal the whole thing, right? It can just show the systems and how they work, and then someone can express it and communicate it and connect those details with that bigger picture. So Gemini are often very good teachers because of this. Mercury is also, again, it's very neutral. It's kind of like a child. It's a neutral planet that's not necessarily ambitious to try to get somewhere. It's not, again, even things like power hungry. It's not like Mars, again, where Mars can get too into like dominating even the sun. Mercury is like very average, normal. It's not, the sign of Gemini. And planets there are not like trying to overpower. In fact, Mercury and the sign of Gemini really has more of confidence issues. Gemini and Cancer are two of the signs where you can see the most it's kind of like that awkward teenager style, that awkward teenager age of life. And the signs can be akin to stages of life. Aries is like the infant being born. Taurus is like the child being nurtured and fed and comforted. Gemini is like, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, where you're just curious about everything and you're developing your interests. Remember when you started to develop your interests, when you weren't just a product of the family you were living in, when you started to develop your own curiosities and interests and things? That stage is very much Gemini, where you're not really sure. You're trying to figure things out. And then Cancer is like that awkward teenager phase where everything feels so sensitive. You're so sensitive to everything. And then Leo is like the young adult out there now conquering the world. Virgo is like, okay, now you conquered the world. Now you have all the pressures. Now you got to get it all organized. And then Libra is you want to share it with someone, like marriage. And then Scorpio is now you realize how vulnerable you are. And like, my God, what have I done? This is what I was so interested in. And then Sagittarius is like, okay, there must be something beyond this that inspires me. Capricorn is like, yes, but you have to work for it. You have to commit to these spiritual truths. And then once you do, Aquarius says, yes, and now I want to share it with everyone. And Pisces says, yeah, but ultimately you have to let go of it all. So that's kind of the evolution of being born on Earth and then letting go of it all in a nutshell. Gemini is the part that is the curious child. Not awkward and insecure and emotional yet, which is when we get to Cancer, but interested and stimulated. But again, once you find something, Like I remember for myself, sports was the big thing. Sports and music, right? I had a whole bunch of interests, but then baseball, it was like, and then you focus on something, right? So this is a big quality of Gemini. And by the way, Rahu is very powerful here. I consider Rahu to be in his strongest sign in Gemini because it's where we are trying to figure things out. That's what Rahu is. We're trying to really understand things with Rahu. It's a very neutral energy, more about an inexperienced part of the soul where we're trying to figure things out. What does this mean? That's actually what Rahu is doing. And that's what Gemini is doing. Rahu is playing with a lot of actions, trying a lot of actions, and Gemini is like deriving meaning from things. Oh, that's what this was about. That's what this was about, trying to get the interpretation. So planets in Gemini have this vibration, right? They have this vibration of Mercury, and they have that feeling of youth, of trying to figure things out and communicate it with others and share it. Oh, look, right? Like we want to, share the thing that we created with, mom and dad and have them put it on the fridge or something, right? That kind of it's very kind of innocent energy. All of these first four, this section of the zodiac, you also want to understand there is a kind of innocent energy around these four. They all have a kind of their young feeling. Taurus as well, even though, again, it could be about pleasure and whatnot. It's a very kind of naive, like trusting nature of Taurus as well. Kind of like when we're a child and we're just in that environment and we have no choice but to be fed by our family and sort of trusting environment where we're like, okay, but I just want to be happy and enjoy life. And I can, and very kind of a sort of innocent relationship to things. Gemini's that intellectual innocence, curiosity. So again, if you have planets there or in any of these three signs, if you're here watching, there's 9 people here. If anybody has planets here, because it can help. If you have planets in any of these 3 signs, put it in the chat. Let us know. I'm going to step over here for a second, and I'll be back in a second. But it's interesting if people do have planets in any of Aries, Taurus, or Gemini, tell us what the planet is and if you can relate to these things I'm saying. Or anything else I've said that's been helpful. Has it been helpful to hear about the channels and how they also come down and interact? Because I think it's very important stuff. Oh, good. We got some nice comments here. Lynn Simpson, I have Mars in Gemini. Prana Roxanne, I have K2 in Taurus and Moon in Gemini. Mars in Taurus, and I suffer from great frustration wanting to destroy certain weaknesses, but simultaneously want to preserve relationships as much as I want to destroy my weakness. Yeah, Eden Rose, that's a perfect thing. And again, when you're looking at someone's chart, you just want to know this. And again, imagine how affirming it is for people to hear this. Like if I was reading your chart And I would just, and especially if you're in a Mars cycle or a Venus cycle that's ruling the Mars, or whatever nakshatra it's in, either Kritika, Rohini, or Mrigashira, and that Mars is getting activated. And I know it's a big part. For example, Jupiter is going through Taurus now. Jupiter is going over that Mars. So again, to hear someone just explain the psychology, and it's a psychology. First, it feels a certain way, then we act on it. But the feeling is the frustration, right? And even Mars has the personal frustration. But again, in Taurus, it's the attachment, like that sensual attachment and pleasure is something that Mars, which wants to evolve, again, evolutionary process of Mars, from fighting to strengthen the physical body, to surmounting external challenges and conflict, to the disciplined yogi courageously facing their deepest self. That's what Mars is trying to do. He's going to try to do it no matter what sign he's in. But you're going to take that energy, again, which is transcendent of this lifetime, and you're going to put it in a psychological environment. And now you're going to say, okay, well, how is this energy operating in this area? How does it feel to the person when they're trying to do that thing? Now, again, we haven't even talked about the houses yet or anything like that, which we'll talk about tomorrow. But again, just seeing it and understanding that process and having the discrimination to separate it and go, okay, that's how it feels to the person. And they're going to get into this conflict with that, right? So thank you, Eden Rose. That's a great share. Annie Hall says, yes, Jupiter and Taurus and Rahu, Mars, Venus, and Gemini. Right. Similar. Frank, I have Moon, Mars conjunct in Gemini. Right. Sun, Venus in Gemini, Saturn in Taurus. So again, one of the things that also just I find liberating about these kinds of examinations when we go back and revisit, again, because most of the time we're not very clear. It all gets jumbled together. When you remember that aside from how the thing feels to you, because you're not just the feelings, you are not the psychology, you are the pure energy behind it. And yes, that feeling is there, but meditation, spiritual practice, and all of that connect you to the pure force, not just the emotion of it. This is, again, that's why when I say these kinds of things, people are like, well, but you can't just pretend like emotions aren't real. They're real too. And people get all twisted around it. It's like, of course that's true. But when people want, we are all looking for liberation from our own emotional charge, from our own drama, from our own psychology. When people want liberation, that's what they want liberation from. We're all tired of how these things. Again, we enjoy it to some extent, but then there's also like, all right, well, it's a state of bondage. That's again, and it's not bad, but we're trying to transcend and evolve it. So if we don't even understand that we have options beyond just how the thing feels to us, then we're stuck. And we're always getting, we're an aggregate of these energies, right? But not at all times. Like I'm in Venus Rahu Dasha right now. So even though this is my chart, right now I'm in Venus Rahu. So I'm getting the very strong karmas of the moon because Venus rules the moon. Venus also rules Mars in Purva Falguni. Right, so it's these rulerships. Venus is in the first. Rahu is also in the first, and it also rules the sun. So again, very specific karmas at specific times that we're working on, that we're working with. So to understand how we're dealing with these feelings and our psychological karma is very powerful at any given time. So that's good. Let's keep going here. So Cancer is and I have for Cancer and Leo, familial as well as personal, because both Cancer and Leo they have these sovereign energies. Cancer is the kind of mother energy, so it's a kind of very familial type of karma. And so is Leo, where again, we feel this obligation to larger family kind of karmas. but also personal. So I have familial and personal sensitivity for the moon because it's the water sign, and feeling. So with Cancer, very positive, nurturing, empathetic, intuitive. Again, this is just the nature of Cancer, is to be nurturing, empathetic, intuitive, where we feel that kind of mothering sensitivity to all people and creatures, animals, everything. That selfless, devotional love like a mother has for the child. And then the negative is the moody, clingy, overly sensitive, where, again, the thing with Cancer that's confusing is, it's all about that kind of innocent feeling. And remember, this part of the zodiac, and I wonder if people who have planets in these signs also relate to that kind of innocent, childlike feeling that I mentioned, because it is a big part. These first 4 signs, it's that section of the zodiac where we're very personally connected to these 4 elements, right? It's very interesting how those first 4 signs are they're very sort of childlike and sort of naive. There's really a lot of naivete within Cancer as well. Again, like that sort of awkward teenager phase where the emotions aren't really sophisticated. They're not nuanced. They're very simple, like a baby almost. A baby and a mother. Both a baby and a mother are very simplistic in the feelings. It's not complicated, right? And so with Cancer, it's very easy to get their feelings hurt. Everything feels so sensitive. The feelings are very on the surface. And again, with Cancer especially, it's like with water signs in general, but with Cancer especially, I say that, Cancer and water signs, but particularly Cancer, it's not that they have feelings, they are feelings. Like everything is feelings. And it's very hard to separate from feelings. It's very hard for all of us too, all planets and water signs. It's very hard to separate from the feeling because they're so deep and primal. But it's also very important to understand with Cancer, particularly, that things like frustration and anger, and there's a whole range of feeling. It's not just that they would do anything for connection. They would do anything for connection, but as soon as they get their feelings hurt, they're also, childish and passive aggressive and these kinds of complex feelings. It's not just the innocent, naive projection of like, why is everyone so mean to me kind of thing, which is how it really often feels to Cancer, because the moon is just that feeling, again, of that empathy for others and that sensitivity where boundaries are not very easy. Again, the opposite is Saturn, where there's a lot of boundaries. So again, learning to find balance between total sensitivity and naivete and boundaries is a big thing for Cancer, without feeling like everything that's a boundary is some kind of harsh, cold, punishing nature. Cancer can tend to feel punished by any situation that is even just a little bit, I wouldn't say off-putting, but even just to where they don't feel like they're flowing, because the Cancer and the moon wants to flow. So anything that cuts off that flow feels harsh and mean and they want to avoid it, because that's the nature of the moon. The moon wants to avoid things that don't feel good. It's a very simplistic kind of transaction. And Jupiter is exalted there. Jupiter, the guru. Again, that very simple feeling. This is why Jupiter is really ultimately about devotion and bhakti, devotion to the guru, devotion to our children. We need to be devoted to the children. Jupiter is the kark of children and gurus and whatnot. Is exalted in Cancer, which is like there's no filter. It's like I just feel that pure love, and it's very uncomplicated, simple, innocent, uncomplicated love. But again, when we get into adult interactions in the world, that simple, uncomplicated love of Cancer gets a whole lot of complexity, and that can be confusing. But again, Jupiter has its exaltation there. I say, my mom had that. It was also with Rahu, so it was complicated, but that she had a lot of devotion, right? Even though she didn't go to church or whatever, there was a lot of just natural devotion. So again, that Jupiter is really about the devotion to the guru, the devotion to the teachings, not just religion, which Jupiter can be, it's important to identify what we believe, but the highest part of Jupiter comes through just being devoted and acting on it. Acting on that devotion, which is what a mother's love is. It's active love. It's not just I feel it. It's I show it. I demonstrate it. I live it. My whole identity revolves around this, nurturing, empathetic, intuitive. So again, when we understand the Jupiter quality, and you don't have to have the planet there in order to understand it. In this book, I spoke about the exaltation placements. You want to understand the exaltation signs of each planet so you can understand the quality of that planet. The highest culmination of Jupiter can be understood by the fact that his exaltation sign is Cancer. It doesn't mean that he has to be in Cancer. It means it's a quality of Jupiter, of Guru. We can see that the culmination of Jupiter energy is shown by the sign of Cancer. Doesn't mean it has to be there. It means when we see the highest aspect of Guru, it's shown by the qualities of Cancer, which is devotion to the Guru, pure love, like we nurture the Guru, like we nurture our baby. By the way, this is why when you see Indian pujas, Indian ceremonies, what do? They have these little statues, and they dress the statue up. They clean the statue. They treat the statue, the Murti of the deity, they treat it like a little baby. Because in doing that, when we wash the statue and bathe the statue and then dress the statue, we're evoking that part of us that wants to nurture children and all of that. It's very intentional. It's not capricious at all. So you see priests will do this when they're doing pujas. It's like, why are they pouring milk over this statue? And again, you can make it complicated. It's really not complicated. When you understand the astrology, when I first started, back when I was writing this book, and I was like, oh, that's because even just watching them do that, watch this statue, this little statue of Ganesha or something, just watching the priest take so much care in like bathing it and dressing it, just like we would a little baby. You put the baby in the bathtub and again, we see this very clearly with our own life, but then, we see it happening with a priest or something, and it seems weird. Nothing weird about it. It's the most natural thing in the world. When you understand this aspect of Guru, is we need to love the Guru like we love our children, which would do anything for them. We're utterly devoted to them, and we should be utterly devoted to God in that way. This is how you can really understand the nature of Cancer, right? This is what's underneath it all. And so Mars winds up being debilitated there because it's too sensitive, too emotional to not get in there and do the fight. So Leo is familial. And by the way, and again, the family thing, that kind of legacy, Sun and Moon are like these sovereigns where they feel like, Cancer wants to be everybody's mommy, right? Again, and they wind up having problems when they try to be the mommy of their partner, and then they get their feelings hurt because their partner doesn't want them to be their mommy. And then they get their feelings hurt, and it's like, I'm just trying to be your mommy. Why don't you appreciate it? It's because you're not my mommy. And stop trying to control me like I'm 5 years old. And then they get their feelings hurt. So again, you can see how Cancer and Leo have this familial and personal. It's very personal with the feelings evolving. And with Leo, it's very personal with that personal vision. But it's back to another fire sign, personal frustration, familial, personal frustration and vision. So again, the frustration is more of an aspect of fire. But again, it's also, in a positive sense, it's that confident, generous, charismatic energy of Leo. And in the negative, it can be arrogant, self-centered, dramatic. Obviously can be quite self-centered with that sun, like I'm the only important one. Again, Aries and Leo have very similar connotation because Mars and the sun feel kind of different, but Mars is more aggressive. The sun is not aggressive. And this is one of the things to really understand, is that the sun is not aggressive in the sense like Mars. The sun is like the king. The king isn't going to fight you. The king is going to get the army to fight you, or the general to fight you, or the bodyguard to, beat you up. He'll get Mars to do it. Mars is the general, the army. The sun is the king. The king isn't going to soil his hands with that. So the sun is more arrogant, which is like, you're not even worth my time kind of energy, right? I'm more focused on the vision to be bothered with the battle. And rightly so, because the sun is what gives us the vision in our life. And again, there's also that false identity that I have this much power, that my power is actually a matter of confidence, when actually when our power revolves around our ego and the feeling of being alive in this lifetime, when you feel like this is you in this body with all these emotions, and that feels like you, then the sun's power feels like the confidence for you, this separate person, to accomplish something in this world. That's what the sun feels like. I have the confidence to do this. I don't have the confidence to do this. But when your consciousness evolves and your identity evolves beyond just this lifetime, then your relationship with the sun evolves beyond just what you have the confidence to do. Because you only have the confidence to do the things you've already done. And that's not where the sun is actually trying to take you. It's trying to take you beyond your comfort zone. The sign of Leo is about that. It's about going beyond your comfort zone and things you're not confident in. So what gets you beyond your comfort zone and the things you're not confident in is vision. I have the vision, whether I succeed or fail, this is my vision, right? This is what Leo is about, is following this vision. Again, you can see why it's like the vision to be a father, to have a kingdom, to be sovereign being, right? So planets in Leo vibrate with that energy. And again, you could see, I talked about Mars being in Leo. So then the fight winds up being for something bigger. It's actually one of the best signs for Mars. I don't want to say it's the best, but it's, again, Aries is obviously good, Scorpio. After that, Leo is really, I think, one of the best. Also because it's a fixed sign. It's one of those fixed signs. It's stable and consistent, which is definitely one of the things you want to try to get Mars focused and not erratic. But so you can see why, because it's that consistent vision. So then Mars is fighting consistent battles based on vision and the courage to expand beyond just what we're confident in doing right now. Very important thing to understand about the sun and Leo, and even things like confidence. Confidence is how the sun and the sign of Leo is experienced through your ego, because you only have confidence to do the things you've done. If you haven't done it before, you don't have the confidence yet. So you're not going to do it unless you have vision. Vision is not confidence. In fact, it's the awareness that whether you succeed or fail, you're still doing the right thing. It's the right thing to do this. Whether I succeed or fail at it, I'm not afraid to fail because at least I'm doing what's right. And again, this righteousness is very much about the sun, about Leo, and about expanding beyond your comfort zone. Again, people in their career and whatnot, I talk about these things all the time in readings because this is where most people stop. They're more worried about afraid of being embarrassed and all this other kind of stuff than they are about accomplishing anything. Those who have accomplished things, particularly as entrepreneurs or whatever, stop worrying about being embarrassed or making mistakes or whatever. At some point, they had more vision than they had self-preservation or confidence, right? So again, these are big Leo themes. So again, when planets are there, we push beyond. And again, planets like Venus and the moon or whatever don't do so well here because they're not big, bold, courageous energies. Venus and the moon and Mercury, Saturn are more tempered down. They're not about big vision things. They're about things that are more practical, buttoned down. But again, if you get one of those planets there, it's what it is. That's going to have that big, bold vision, like a lion, to get out there and conquer territory. But again, the Leo always has to watch that arrogant, self-centered, dramatic, attachment to the goals and like, it's me and how dare you oppose what I'm doing. So with Virgo, we have intellectual, which is, again, the Mercury keyword, attachment, which is the earth sign, and structure. So Virgo very much likes to create structure after they organize things. But you see, with Gemini, it's intellectual movement. With Virgo, intellectual attachment. Virgo is like, oh, they grab on the thing. Again, with Gemini, it's like, who knows? It's like the wind. There's not a lot of attachment in Gemini. With Virgo, there's a lot of attachment. And it's one of the things that Virgo, again, planets in Virgo have to be careful of, is like being very attached to their ideas and the things they organize, and then worrying about all those things that they haven't organized yet and haven't structured. Because again, intellectual attachment and structure. Virgo wants to have a plan, a structure. Okay, I recognize all these details. Now let me get them organized, perfected, and have a structure. Now again, it's a wonderful thing, but it also can feel very much like a trap if we're not careful. So in positive, again, it's very detail-oriented, analytical, reliable. Again, that also reliable like that other earth sign. Negative, it can be overly critical, perfectionist, anxious. Again, I added some of these here. I went into the AI and made sure to put some of these here, particularly the anxious. It's worrying about all the details that we haven't organized yet. This is really kind of like the psychology of Virgo. Now, again, the power is that we need to take these details seriously. Mercury is exalted in Virgo for a reason, right? Mercury is exalted in Virgo for a reason because we need to take the details seriously, not just play around with them. But we can also have this illusion that, okay, it's up to me to like organize the universe into a spreadsheet where it all makes sense. But it's impossible. There's always details and the future that I'm not in control of. Again, control is a big Virgo issue. So we see this is a chart of someone who has Saturn, Jupiter, Moon, for example, in Virgo. So there's a lot of worrying here. Look at all these planets. My dad and my mom both had, I didn't even know. I haven't looked at their charts that much. My mom and dad both have the moon in Virgo. Makes some sense there, actually, to be honest with you. They were both pretty worried. My dad, for my mom, it was her 11th house. Her moon in Virgo. That makes sense. So, she definitely had a worrisome mentality. She wound up with, she was one of the earliest people to go on, what was that drug? The tranquilizer from the from the mid 80s. This started back then. I always forget what it's called. Prozac, I think. So she got on those. She had this anxiety, like, she was one of these diagnosed with this manic depressive and then OCD and all this kind of stuff, right? She got those diagnoses and went on prescription drug medicine even in the mid 80s when they first came out. I mean, I guess they were there before, but so again, this kind of worried mentality, right? Very stressed and anxious. It can have that nature. Again, this is just the feeling. This is how it feels. So again, this thing to understand, it's just an effect, that affectation. That's how it felt, but it doesn't define who the person is. We're transcendent of those things, right? But a plant's going to feel that way to us, where we're worrying about all those details that we haven't organized yet. So again, when you get planets like Mercury there, now Venus is in the debilitated sign there. I tend to see it as the least problematic. This is the one where I consider its exaltation to be the least positive and its debilitation to be the least negative. We'll talk about it when we get to Pisces, but we'll just say, because Venus is very much about life on Earth and being practical in relationship and feeling good about our agreements, right? In Virgo, the problem is that we're very, we can be overly critical, perfectionist, and kind of nitpicky. That's the simplest way to put it for Virgo. But, at least for Venus, we have at least we understand the agreement, but we might be a little perfectionistic. In Pisces, it's like no boundaries. So it's kind of like Venus, the sensuality kind of goes off the chart. So we got to watch it. But in general, with Virgo, that energy is, we're very serious but worried. And we can do a lot of fault finding, hair splitting with ourselves. Because again, Mercury, you want to understand something. The gentle planets, especially Mercury, Venus, and the moon, those three especially, I'm going to take Jupiter out of this one for now, but especially those three planets will harm ourselves more than harm others. Jupiter is kind of in the middle because Jupiter is very judgmental and can come down with can have a kind of wrathful energy, particularly if it's fiery. But usually the moon, Mercury, and Venus, when there are problems like worrying and this, it hurts the self-confidence. And the person will be critical of themselves more than others. Now, again, they also are critical of others, but they'll hound themselves a lot. They don't do they're much more, again, self-critical, because Mercury and Venus are gentle planets and they're very personal planets. Mercury, again, like I said, it's how we try to figure things out. It's a kind of much more of a playful, innocent energy. And Venus is also very accommodating. And so is the moon. So when they get harmed, it often makes for self-doubt. Like, I'm wrong. I'm the bad one. I'm the one. Often with the other planets, the sun, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, again, is kind of in the middle, but it's like, you're the problem. You did it. You're to blame. I'm going to punish you, attack you, blame you. Again, these are general, but in general, the cruel planets. This is one of the differences between the gentle and the cruel planets. And you might be surprised I'm not putting Jupiter there. I'm not, because I know Jupiter can also be very judgmental, particularly in a fiery sense. In a watery sense, it's not. But you want to understand this, and I'm saying it because with Virgo, there's a lot of that self-criticism that really comes in. One of the biggest things planets in Virgo have to be aware of is this: I'm no good, I have all these flaws, and taking all of that on themselves first, and in a big way, right? So that's definitely something that Virgo has to be aware of when planets are in Virgo. And again, by the way, this was my mom and my father too, even though my father reacted to it differently. A lot of insecurity and self-doubt and self-loathing, actually. And you see, my father also had that here. his moon there is aspected by this Jupiter Mars up here in Pisces. This is my father. So he had a lot of that kind of with the self-loathing as well. I don't really know his ascendant. So, and then we get into Libra, 7th house. This positive, cooperative, harmonious, committed is the 7th house. I'm sorry, not a Libra, but the 7th. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. What am I doing? 7th house. One more time, Sam. Come on. Libra, relational movement and harmony. So again, we're talking about the relational now because it's Venus. The movement is the air, and the harmony is really what Venus is trying to create in Libra. And so again, in the positive sense, easy to see that it's diplomatic, charming, fair-minded. In the negative, it's indecisive, people-pleasing, avoidant. This quality of Libra, again, it's ruled by Venus, so planets there are going to have this awareness of others. Like, again, you go back to Aries, it's I'm the important one. This is why I made the distinction. Personal, it's like me, I'm the important one. Libra starts with the thing, you're the important one. So Libra is where we really flip and say, I'm ready to yield, to have a connection with you and see the beauty in you. It's different than the moon. The moon is where we have this feeling of wanting to merge feeling. Venus isn't that. And Libra isn't that. It's more intellectual and observant and seeing the beauty and the value. And again, it's also driven by sexuality, sensuality, physicality. It's not, and ultimately we're trying to upward spiral that evolution, that evolutionary process of Venus from extensive sensual gratification, hedonism, to romantic desire-filled love, to finding happiness for no reason is the evolutionary process of Venus. So we're first very driven by the senses and how people look and things taste and all that. But then in Libra, it's very refined and trying to connect it with other individuals through ideas, harmonious interactions, fun. So, but, with Libra, we tend to lose ourselves in that exchange because we want the connection. We learn that if I want a connection, then I need to be agreeable and pleasant and nice to you, so I get what I want. So we learn how to be diplomatic and also quite political in this regard. And again, so there's a lot of confusion around this with the Libra energy of, again, people think they're martyrs when they get in relationships because of all the compromises they make, but everybody's doing it. And we're doing it because of what we want, because we want the connection with the person. Again, maybe we want the sex, we want the power, we want the attention from the person we admire. This one is more like from the female, like, oh, I really admire him. I want him to give me attention, so I'll do what I can to make him happy. And the man the same way. Oh, she's hot. What can I do to get her attention, right? So we learn how to do this. And then eventually, as we mature, we learn that we're going to suffer if we compromise on things that we shouldn't compromise on. Certain values, certain, again, principles and convictions are not worth the connection. But again, it's a topsy-turvy sign, right? So again, in the positive sense, not in the unconscious sense, but we do naturally see the beauty in the other person and we feel good, not just individual, but in people in general. We see the beauty in everyone with Venus. So we do naturally want to be diplomatic. We want to make people happy. We want them to be happy and we want them to like us. That's a good instinct, right? And it comes from Venus. This can make us charming, very fair-minded, big Libra thing. I don't have to agree with you to still see the beauty in you. But again, in the negative sense, we're kind of indecisive, and the indecision comes with Libra because how do I make you happy and me happy when it's not possible, when I need to be decisive? well, I'll just put it off, right? So Libra gets in these conundrums and becomes indecisive when it's like, but you're asking me to do something that I can't do, so I'll just delay it, and maybe something will happen where I don't have to make the decision. See, this is also what Libra does. I'll delay it, and I'll frustrate you to death with my indecision. And then when you get frustrated with my indecision, I'll say, ha ha, why don't you be nice? Why don't you be nicer? Libra can drive you nuts with this stuff. Well, and it's not just not indecision, but it's just like constantly playing devil's advocate or back and forth, and like not coming down on a yes or no, good or bad, right or wrong kind of thing. And then someone's like, oh, come on, stop just batting everything around. And then once you react, once you get the Mars thing, then the Libra's like, oh, well, that wasn't nice. And again, it just kind of gets in this indecisive. Again, indecisive isn't the greatest word for it. It's more of this, what I call it just like this kind of devil's advocate back and forth. It's not always indecisive. Sometimes it's decisive, and then the next minute they'll say the opposite thing. They'll just constantly want to play devil's advocate. This is the thing I notice more with Libra. Sometimes it's indecisive, but it's often just, well, but there's this, well, but there's that, well. And it's unbalancing things so that they can balance them later. So they can unbalance you, make you feel like you're the unbalanced one. So then they can balance you and go, whoa, wait a minute, what's the matter? Right? So it's like, yeah, I've many Libra associates. And by the way, I have my moon in Libra. So I understand, I'm pretty decisive. I don't do that so much. I do other things with that Libra energy. Conflict avoidant, some of this for sure. The way it can show up too, because it's the moon, and the moon wants that selfless connection, and Libra is transactional. This is how you can see these things work. So my moon, which like everyone, the moon wants to have that selfless love, that selfless connection. But it's in Libra, which is very transactional, about an agreement. So when my capacity and desire for selfless love winds up feeling unfair, big Libra thing, it can make it hard, right? So this is how these conflicts can show up. The moon wants to just flow in selfless love, but I can't because it has to be fair, but it's not fair. And the moon is the part of us that doesn't care if it's fair or not, but I do. Right? It feels like that to me, and it's very hard to have it not be fair. See? So it can show up like that. But again, with Libra, that indecisive, people-pleasing, losing ourselves in others, and then feeling like they did something to us. We have to have those boundaries and know where our no compromise zones are. Again, conflict avoidant for a while. We avoid conflict and we don't until we explode. Again, just like I said with Mars, Libra will avoid the conflict until they've avoided the conflict for so long that they've also convinced themselves that it's your fault that they've avoided the conflict, when that's not the case at all. It's not your fault that they avoided the conflict. They avoided the conflict because they wanted the connection more than they wanted to break it by saying something. And then it can create a conflict, because there's nothing saying that just because you disagree about something, there has to be a conflict. Some of us, and by the way, I'm quite good at this because my moon is in Libra, but Libra is a very dharmic house for me. It's in the 5th house. So I understand the Libra energy very well. So I can navigate a lot of complicated relationships without having conflict. I can see very clearly. That's not the part that messes. The Libra part doesn't get messed up. It's the moon part that does. The Libra part is actually quite strong. The moon part isn't. So again, we become conflict avoidant when we're afraid of breaking connection because of what might happen if we speak the truth, right? So again, these are things to understand. Then we get into Scorpio, dynamic, sensitivity, and passion. So So again, dynamic is like that Mars, that sort of dynamic sensitivity, and passion. Again, these are very Mars and emotional terms. Again, Scorpio is quite complicated because it is an emotional sign, but it's ruled by Mars, which is actually a very desensitizing energy, right? The other two water signs are ruled by Jupiter and the moon, which are both big givers. Mars isn't. So we're trying to protect our emotions and protect ourselves from painful emotions, but yet emotions want to flow. They don't want to be fought over. The thing we hate the most with emotions is to fight, yet Scorpio is fighting and being very emotional fighting. So it's a complicated sign, probably the most complicated and confusing for the people. And it needs a lot of empathy and transformation to transform the emotional frustration. It's really a sign of that emotional frustration. So positive, passionate, determined, resourceful, definitely. And negative, jealous, secretive, controlling. Again, because these are ways where we feel vulnerable. The biggest thing to really understand, the motivator for Scorpio, is that vulnerability, where we know that we're not in control of our emotions when we feel like other people are in control of our emotions, or other circumstances, larger circumstances, are in control. It might not be another person, but it often comes out with other people. Again, the signs have a progression. Libra is where we make this agreement, where we become vulnerable, where we make an agreement with another person. Again, where we get hooked into things like sex and values and all of it's like, okay, we're in it. You and I are one, right? And when we do that, we feel vulnerable. It's like, okay, now I've given up a lot of my autonomy and control to you. I got to ask you for everything now, or something. And Scorpio's like, oh man, I was expecting to feel this way. The vulnerability. And falsely, especially in Western astrology, you hear Scorpio sex and all this. Scorpio isn't the sex. Libra is the sex. And it's mostly the seventh house. Scorpio is more akin to the vulnerability that comes once you, again, it's not just sex, it's any kind of vulnerable agreement brings out this Scorpio desire to have control, right? We become a bit secretive. You notice where your partners, they're not showing you everything because they're like, well, I don't know if I want to let you see that thing. You might use it against me. Jealous. Again, these are things where we're afraid that the person where we've connected, now that they have power over us and they can really hurt us, because again, it's a sensitive emotional sign. And what happens if you take it away? What happens if you like somebody else now and I have all these feelings? So they can become jealous and then try to be controlling in these kinds of things. So it gets very complicated psychologically and emotionally with Scorpio. So they need to connect to the heart, like all water signs. They need to connect to that deeper devotion and channel that energy of Mars into emotional courage. Again, they have the courage to face those vulnerabilities, but especially not project that onto others and try to control their vulnerabilities. Instead, control the real vulnerability, which is their own insecurity, like all of us. We're all vulnerable and insecure, and we all have these energies somewhere. All of us have Scorpio somewhere, even if we don't have planets there. We are vulnerable. That's why I use that example. It always comes out when we have relationships. We feel that Scorpio vulnerability, whether we have planets there or not. But if we have planets there, it's obviously more magnified, and this thing becomes a big issue. This is what the signs are. These emotions become very activated. So again, but in a very neutral way, it's this kind of dynamic sensitivity and passion, very passionate. Like, again, because Mars is very passionate. It's that lust for life and that lust to want to survive and to win and to conquer and to do big things. So Scorpio, planets in Scorpio are also very focused on things like work and career and responsibility and and like helping others. Again, that Mars strength and courage is also very developed. And so again, this is a person I know who has their Scorpio ascendant. Also, my mom had that Scorpio ascendant as well. Very, dynamic and sensitive and passionate person. And then Sagittarius, spiritual frustration and purpose. And again, I put the frustration for the Aries. I'm sorry, for the fire signs, because again, I'm really trying to land the concept that we have these emotions, and we're really trying to get free of the difficult quality of it. And again, Sagittarius has a spiritual frustration, but aligned with a sense of purpose. But again, it's ruled by Jupiter, so it's an inspiring sign. But eventually, it's a kind of religious sign. And whether people are believers or not, we have a bit of spiritual frustration because we're still here on Earth and we don't really know. We have to believe. And in some ways, the more dogmatic someone is, the more frustrated they are when you question. I mean, look at what happens when you question like a real conservative. Again, if they're not so dogmatic and they're open, then they don't mind it as much. But if someone is really dogmatic, you really see their frustration come out, because you're undermining their whole reason for living, their whole purpose, right? So again, there's a lot. This is a Sagittarius theme. And in general, Sagittarius, again, in a positive sense, adventurous, optimistic, honest, in the sense of like, honorable would maybe be a better word. Negative, reckless, tactless, restless. Yeah, it can be, Sagittarius can have, the other one I would add here would also be dogmatic. And it's kind of, sort of haphazard with Jupiter, especially through Sagittarius. It can be kind of random, opposite of Gemini, but for different reasons. And also often in the negative with things like speech and details and other people. This is why the tactless part is really quite true. Sagittarius can have this over certainty, right? Because again, Jupiter gives us this, kind of certainty around things, especially through Sagittarius, where we can have a lot of opinions. And this is often the difficult quality of the fire signs and even the fiery planets, where instead of having good discrimination and practical ways of seeing things, in Sagittarius, for sure, you can definitely see this, like where opinions take the place of intelligence and thought out concepts. So again, this sort of dogmatic, like, well, I just believe it. Or again, when you see like, for example, Mercury in Sagittarius, even Venus, where we're kind of like, where we know how everybody should be treated, or I know what everything means. And because of these beliefs, it can have that sort of tactless quality and this sort of, but a sort of restlessness as well. But again, for Sagittarius, it's also one of the most, it's said to be the most blessed sign. So with all of that said, Sagittarius is definitely one of the most blessed. It's the sign where we start looking for answers and start looking for inspiration and start looking for higher meaning. And especially coming after Scorpio, there's quite a bit of desire to find an answer. But sometimes we want to find the answer very quickly. Jupiter in the fire sign is like, okay, this is the thing. And again, if you want to really understand, think about how your beliefs have changed. I mean, go back even 5 years and think what you believed 10 years. And again, I'm not saying necessarily, maybe you've had consistent beliefs for a long time, but go back like into your 20s or 30s, or I don't know, however old you are, and notice what you were saying. Like, what was, this is what it's about, or this, and not just about life, but about all things. This is what relationships are. Relationships are blah, blah. So really, again, you want to understand that Jupiter, and particularly with Sagittarius, is mostly about our philosophies, our big beliefs about things, even your belief about religion, your belief about relationships, your belief about work, your belief about money. We have beliefs about all kinds of stuff. So again, when people have very important planets in Sagittarius, they have a lot of these beliefs, and sometimes again they're kind of just, they're not so grounded, but yet they're expounding upon these beliefs that are, again, as it says here, at times sort of reckless, tactless, but they're also restless. They're searching because it's a dual sign, and they're looking for the answer, and we don't have the answer. The answer isn't some religion or some this or that. It's in practices. We have to do practices, then we connect with the essence, not just of Jupiter, but of everything. So again, it's kind of complicated, and particularly with these planets that are big givers like Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, the moon, because they're such big givers, we enjoy those things and we can miss what we're doing. Jupiter is one of the biggest ones. You want to understand this about Jupiter, because we get a lot out of our Jupiter. It's our whole meaning. But sometimes we all, spiritual bypassing is Jupiter. Think of how much we talk and we say this and we don't really know what we're saying. I deal with it all the time with astrology. For example, I'll do posts on the internet or whatnot and all, and then all the experts come out, oh, blah, 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 and they just say all these things, and they don't really know any of it. I mean, they don't know it, like they haven't done charts. It's not saying it's all wrong, but what it's saying is that you're just talking. None of this is founded. You haven't done, and I'm not saying that's true with everyone, but I can see when it's definitely true, where people are just, they're correcting me about something, or they're saying something that I can tell they haven't figured out. They don't really know this thing. They believe it, and now they're going to say it as if it's fact. Again, just how much of that is, it's ubiquitous. People do it constantly. They're always doing it. And yeah, you can see this is also a thing that particularly irks a Gemini, because I am Gemini, and Gemini is very focused on words and what people are saying, and whether people are saying things that they know and understand, or whether they're just kind of saying, I have this opinion and it's fact, and I'm going to say it because I believe it. And it's just as valid as something that someone has worked through for 20 years, who really knows. And again, it's not even just with this. I'm using this example as something that I see, but it's all over the place, even with conspiracies and stuff now, where everybody's an expert about all this stuff now. Oh, I know. And again, a lot of it is we just have beliefs about this stuff. People don't really know. They just believe the thing, and then they get out and say it as if it's fact because they believe it, right? So think of how ubiquitous that is, how much that exists. And if you question them and say, yeah, but you don't really know this, like, well, you don't either. And then they get into irrational, silly arguments. Anyway, so understand this being a quality of Jupiter, where we're just shooting our mouth off about things we believe, but we don't really know. Again, this is the stress and tension between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury is going to say, yeah, but you don't know what you're talking about. Okay? It doesn't mean it's totally wrong, but here's where it's not right. And it's okay to say that, but you need to be precise in what you're saying. And it's okay that you don't have it all figured out. No one does. But it's dangerous to just say a bunch of stuff that you don't know. So again, I'm being intentional here with Sagittarius and Jupiter and stuff, because there's a lot of overlooking of difficulties that come from our beliefs. And it's so tempting to make Jupiter especially to only be like, it's spiritual. It's that it's also all the bypassing, all the confusion around things that we don't really know, but we believe. Again, even talking in the beginning of this class about how many people are like, oh, I already know all that stuff. I don't need to hear that again, explain it. It's like, you really know it? Really? So always we got to watch those. That's the nature. But last thing, the reason we like that Jupiter so much is because, and Sagittarius, is because we get so much out of it. Look at what the ego gets with these beliefs. Again, that's why I said, when you question someone's dogmas or their religion or whatever it is they're saying, they fight because it's like the meaning of life is wrapped up in these philosophies that we have. We have these philosophies about what we believe, and we believe it's factual. And if you question it, you're questioning my whole paradigm. This is why people really get upset and get angry when you say things like this, and they'll say, oh, you're so judgmental. And again, they'll even project their judgment onto you because you're saying that the things they're saying are incorrect. Again, so it's very, very tricky, Jupiter and Sagittarius. So, and these are big themes right now because we have this Jupiter-Venus exchange also happening. Or I'm sorry, that's about to start happening. So then we have Capricorn, which comes after Sagittarius. This is like material attachment and focus. So again, the material is the earth. The attachment is really what earth really gets us into. And then the focus is very much about Saturn. As you see, I have the focus down here also with Aquarius, because this is really the quality of Saturn. So in the positive sense, it's ambitious, disciplined, practical. Disciplined, maybe I could have changed that to determined, which I like better for Saturn. Ambitious, determined, practical is very much Capricorn. Negative, cold, the negative is cold, rigid, workaholic. We're trying to protect ourselves with Capricorn energy. So again, these are keywords to give a feeling, right? That ambition, that sense of duty and commitment, and that practical nature. It feels very, very structured. But again, in the negative, it can feel cold, rigid, workaholic kind of energy. So when you get a lot of planets there, now I have my Saturn there, which is good because Saturn's the ruler of that. So he's trying to do that anyway. You'll see there's, my dad had Venus there. We have this fella here who's got several planets there in Capricorn. So again, you can really see how these, my father was a very disciplined, focused artist. He was very good with art, with creating art. He was self-taught with like music and art. He had his Venus in Capricorn. Now I don't really know what the ascendant is, but so again, and Capricorn is that reflective internal quality of Saturn. So again, that sort of positive nature is to be thorough and to finish things and to make a commitment to it. That's what Saturn is, like to evolve beyond just our fears and stresses of the world and make a commitment to things that are long lasting and enduring, not just of the moment. But in the negative, we become aware of the endings and difficulties and struggles. So again, with the difficult planets like Saturn, we can feel more of the negative quality than the positive quality. This is also just a principle because Saturn is one of the functional one of the natural malefics. We can tend to feel more of his negative qualities. Sometimes it's harder to feel the positive qualities of Capricorn, just like it's harder to feel the negative qualities of Sagittarius. Kind of why I described it a little bit more, because we're used to the adventurous, optimistic, honest, even honest when we're wrong. Like, at least we're being honest, right? I'm telling you what it is. it's hard to feel the negative qualities sometimes of the natural benefics. It's like with Scorpio, it's hard to feel the positive qualities of it, which is that passion, determined quality that wants to hold space and help others transform and things like that. If I didn't say it clearly enough, it's that devotion through Scorpio, that fixed water to be more devotional, right? And it has a lot of that, has that emotional commitment there, right? And maybe I'm focusing a little more on the negative so that we understand it, because we get stuck, we get trapped in the negative part of the signs. But so again, with Capricorn, we need to be aware of that. And we are often aware of its heavy feeling, like, oh, that's not fun. And particularly particularly Saturn ruled signs, and particularly Capricorn. Capricorn is one of the biggest bummer signs. Capricorn and Virgo, actually, just it doesn't feel good to us. We're just like, oh, but why do things feel so hard? Why are things such a struggle? Why do things feel heavy? With Virgo, it's because that's stress, and with Capricorn, it's like, oh, no matter what, it can feel very heavy. So again, in the positive sense, though, when there's some practical work and something to, problems to solve, the Capricorn, the planet in Capricorn really springs to life. So again, this is how the planets feel in Capricorn. Aquarius, it's a transpersonal, which is more of the nature of Aquarius, that universal air, and also the movement. And beyond the personal is also a Saturn theme. And focus, which is also Saturn. So the positive is innovative, independent, visionary. And the negative is detached, unpredictable, aloof. So there is this very independent nature of Aquarius and it's more universal in the sense of it's an independence that comes from, in some ways, feeling unattached to our ego. We feel kind of free of our own personal power and identity. So it feels very universal, like we're part of the collective. So again, this can lead to a very innovative mindset, because we're sort of tapping into a collective awareness with Aquarius, transpersonal. And again, there's this kind of movement because it's an air sign. And independent, because again, it's interesting because you would think independent would also be connected to Leo. It sort of is, but it's actually, it's not local identity. It's like a collective identity, which in itself can be quite liberating. And again, this is in the positive sense. In the negative sense, again, it says detached, unpredictable, aloof. It could also be depressed, would be another one that could be added here, because we can be depressed because we don't have that strong sense of identity. So again, there could be an independent nature, a feeling of being independent, but it's also like where we're not dependent on our own strong identity. So it's independent because we don't feel dependent on our own strong persona. But not having that strong persona can also be a bit depressing, because we can look for charismatic figures or things to get aligned with. And again, a lot of those things that we get aligned with are like independent movements and eccentric, visionary type of things, scientific, cultural, political movements and things like that. Because again, Aquarius is the part of Saturn that is, after we deal with the emotional complexity of Saturn through Capricorn, where we have to face our solitude and whatnot, then we take that out and be like, okay, I realize I'm not just this person of the world or of this body and these painful emotions, and I want to share it. So Aquarius has that kind of larger universality of, an identity that's really based a lot more on that. But on the personal level, many times Aquarius is like, but who am I in the midst of this whole thing? All these cultural things that are going to outlive me, that are going to outlast me. Because again, this is really what Saturn brings us to, this need to let go of the world, from excessive physical worry and material accumulation to worldly ambition, achievement, control, and to a peaceful solitude without fear and loneliness. That's really the evolutionary process of Saturn. So once we kind of work through that, in Capricorn, we work through that a lot because it's that introspection. Then Aquarius is like, okay. But again, being born into the Aquarius principle, we're like trying to evolve that. And if we don't really connect with that, do that sort of Capricorn work where we understand our transpersonal identity and we try to fixate on this world, it creates that sort of difficulty of identity where our unique identity is based on a collective thing or something. It gets tough. One of the hardest things for Aquarius is to have that sort of healthy identity. But again, planets in Aquarius and the psychology of Aquarius is that collective awareness, but it's much more of an intellectual thing. With Pisces is the last one. And again, it can feel similar, like, okay, well, Aquarius is transpersonal. I thought that was Pisces. Aquarius is still of the world. In many ways, in Capricorn, we kind of leave our personal worldly baggage. It's kind of like where we destroy our false identity in Capricorn. Again, where we can thrive in stillness and solitude, and we've destroyed that notion that I'm this person with all these beliefs and philosophies. No, I'm not any of that. And then we sort of chuck it in Capricorn. We've made peace with it. Then in Aquarius, we kind of come out and go, okay, I'm actually this person of the world. I'm not this separate person with all these personal beliefs and foibles. I'm a collective person of the world, Aquarius. And Pisces is like, no, you're not that either. You're not even this universal person who wants to save the world, make the world a better place, serve humanity, blah, blah. All that is Aquarius. Pisces is like, you're not that either. Let go of all of it. Right? So again, with Pisces, I put spiritual as the Jupiter sort of connection because we're trying to connect to spirit beyond this world. Sensitivity, which is the water, and escapism, which is, again, positive or negative. We're trying to escape from the false narrative, from the false story, from the false identity. But what we wind up doing often is just escaping, and the ways that we do it are through impure means, or means that are unhealthy and based on something of the world, because we define ourselves and we have so much attachment to the emotions and the things that we're doing. We say, oh, this is me. I'm this person who feels this way, who's living this life, who had this childhood, who has this. Oh, I want to escape from all of that. So let me get drunk, get high, watch TV. Instead of escaping from that, which we need to escape from it, into meditation, devotion, authentic teaching, where we dissolve the attachment to the unreal and awaken to the real naturally through, again, meditation, spiritual practice, actual spiritual practice. So Pisces is where things are just going to dissolve. They're going to slip through our hands where we don't feel as connected to this world. So planets there can already feel that this isn't real. This is unreal. So we can connect to the unreal again through, okay, so it's unreal, right? So when I get drunk, I'm tuning all of this out. So we're trying to tune into that transcendent reality through Pisces. So again, in the positive, there's a lot of compassion, creativity, authentic spiritual energy. In the negative, there's this escapism, overly idealistic, vague. These are definitely qualities of Pisces where we're just kind of spacey. Overly idealistic can certainly be there as well. This Jupiter. It can also be quite negative. So there's the idealism is there, especially idealizing things that are, trying to put like a sort of bypassing. Again, you got to remember Jupiter is that energy of bypassing. Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces. And whether it's Sagittarius or Pisces, Jupiter, again, it's a benefic. So it wants to kind of rise above and idealize and, again, sort of rise above the thing. Sometimes we do it through this big philosophy. Oh, already know all about that. I'm not confused about this thing. I have this philosophy and these ideas, right? Even though we don't really know it, we're comforted by these ideas that help us rise above our fears and all that stuff. Again, I just explained it through Sagittarius. It could be more aggressive, more again, because it's fiery and it's more, engaging. With Pisces, it's the same kind of tendency, perhaps, but it's more internal, psychological. And again, but this idealistic thing like, oh, yeah, well, and what can happen is we can, again, especially in the sense of trying to heal, people and being idealistic about, again, just as an example, like abuse or where people are mean. Oh, they didn't really mean it. They were, don't you understand? They were just, wounded as children. So I'll try to help them. This is a kind of negative Pisces stereotype, which isn't entirely wrong, where they can overlook the flaws. Again, it's opposite Virgo, where we notice all the flaws. Pisces is like, oh, well, but, somebody's got to love them and take care of them and all. So Pisces can do this kind of thing. They can feel all the sensitivities of the world and feel them very deeply. And then because they're feeling so much, they want to escape from it. They're like, and they wind up getting in situations where they're hurt very sensitively. And they might, again, idealize other people or something and then want to escape from it. So again, I'm talking about this as if they're people, but planets there do it. So again, Saturn is there. It's going to bring this. The moon, it's going to bring this. I wind up having Jupiter there, which is good because Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces. So it winds up bringing awareness to this thing. And those kinds of things show up, right? With Jupiter and Pisces, it's appropriate there. It's not, it's bringing consciousness to that thing, but it's the same kind of thing where it's like, okay, I have to do what I can do, right? Whatever it might be in that context. So again, like my father also had Jupiter and Mars there, right? So, so again, these are the 12 signs. People can add some comments if you like. I appreciate people haven't been chatting the whole time. You certainly can if you have some questions about some of the ones that I said, or some clarification around any of it, or a few of the concepts. Let me take a drink here. And I did see Eden Rose's comment earlier when I asked about the naive aspect of those first 4 signs. Eden Rose says, often feel like a naive child who's always opening to understanding but never a pro at knowing and suffer the consequence of naivete. I tend to attribute this to having Moon and Gemini. Yeah, I mean, look at all the planets I have there. That kind of is the same. I have them, so many here. It's definitely the same kind of thing where, it's hard to believe I'm 60. Like I literally still feel like a teenager or something, it's, again, it's very interesting to ponder these things, but I also feel like a very old soul, because I felt like I was an old soul. And again, these things are kind of misnomers, but I felt like I was 60 when I was 10 also. I also have Saturn in Capricorn and Jupiter in Pisces. It's something to really dial in here. These qualities of the age, like a kind of age and stage of life for these planets, or for these signs. And again, definitely, Gemini is it's like a playful child, and that childlike kind of nature, right? And it's very interesting. Mars, this is where we start the kind of adult, and Mars has those kind of adult battles, right? I mean, I can feel this even as I'm talking about it. Saturn, this is like, even when I was a kid, took things very seriously. But I was still also really goofy play, trying all kinds of things, but I was also inside deadly serious. I've always been like deadly serious. And, having Jupiter in Pisces, it is kind of like just always also totally dialed into this like mystical, just it's just the knowing that this isn't real. And it's not an escapist, like, oh, this isn't real. No, it's like knowing that this isn't real, and just being like, wow, this isn't real. Like, even not knowing what was real, knowing that this isn't real, and just being like, well, what is real? And that's the only thing that I really tried to understand. And even so, and that's why I'm sure it's why when I wasn't even 20 years old, I just started doing intensive meditation. I was in Saturn Moon and Saturn Mars Dasha, and I literally was like a monk. I mean, without getting too graphic, I mean, I didn't have sex or like masturbate or anything for like 4 years when I was like 18 to or 19 to 23 or so. I was like celibate. And I was like working, I was out in the world and everything, and I was totem brahmachari and all this stuff. It was like insane. It's like the only thing I wanted to do is find out like what's real. And Saturn Moon, Saturn Mars, by the way, and Saturn was going over my moon. It was full on sati sati. Everybody talks about how sati sati is the end of your life, and sati sati is so horrible. I mean, my sati sati, I was living like a monk, completely just like totally dialed into like an absolute other dimension of consciousness for years, and absolutely blissful. No, but so it's like, it's like those like ages are, and these tendencies are wired, and again, it's like that's how it feels. That's how that energy feels in you, right? So Lynn Simpson said, I'm finding the streamlined explanation of the planets and signs really helpful. Thank you. No, you're welcome. That's why I did it. I wouldn't teach it again if I didn't think it was helpful. And Lynn just graduated from the level 1 certification. Yay, Lynn. Yay. And I know there are certification course students here. And again, I know this stuff is helpful. It's helpful for me, and I've been doing it 25 years. And so, again, especially to just get down and really streamline, like understand everyone what these things are. Like these are these 7 specific channels of karma. Karma isn't like, boy, could we ever figure out what karma is? Oh, it's so confusing. It's not. There are 7 like evolutionary processes. That's all karma is. If you can take and make it simple, right? Everything is not so overwhelming. Just because there are a lot of details doesn't mean we have to get confused by them. There's an order to things. You start with a certain concept and context. You start there, and then it's like, all right, these are the 7 forces that are evolving. This is what they are. Now they go into these areas in this lifetime. You incarnated. They're going to feel this way. Each one of those specific channels are evolving within this context, this environment. This is how it feels as it's evolving in you. right? And so again, the other thing to know is that when we start looking at like what I was doing and putting planets in certain signs, we're understanding, like when planets are in their own sign, they're evolving within an environment that they rule. It's like Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so then having Saturn in the place that he rules is like it's congruent. So the feeling that's happening with that evolutionary channel is exactly the feeling that it also creates. Just like with that Jupiter, like I'm saying, that Jupiter channel, which is evolving pure spiritual connection, is in the place that feels that way also. Right? So, but but again, like I said with my moon, it's not. So with the moon, the channel that's trying to feel devotion, not just emotions on the surface, not just emotions with other people, but it's trying to develop deeper devotion and connection to that universal love. It ain't flowing in that environment. It's in Venus, or I'm sorry, it's in Libra, where even though that's the thing that's still evolving, to me, it feels like, well, I can be okay with it if it's fair. If there's fairness, then I'm okay. But that's not what makes that thing evolve. That's an obstruction to the energy. Saturn is exalted there. So that's the kind of energy that exalts Saturn. That transactional nature of Libra is where Saturn is exalted, right? That diplomatic, charming, fair-minded, because Saturn, we can be like, right? Saturn is debilitated in Aries, where it's like, I'm right, I'm going to do whatever I feel like and not think about anything. That's going to destroy what Saturn is trying to do. So Saturn has that exaltation in Libra where it's like, let me be careful. Let me be fair-minded. Let me listen to others. Maybe it's not as bad as I'm making it out, because Saturn, we get worried and stressed, right? So again, these environments have these different energies. Vaishnavi says Jupiter and Capricorn, right? So again, it's more that practical nature, because Jupiter is where we're trying to evolve our connection beyond just the material, right? From excessive material growth and attachment to an over-reliance upon man-made worldly happiness to a mind filled with the highest universal wisdom is the evolutionary process of Jupiter. So in Capricorn, it gets very bogged down in practical things. Money, the earth, stuff that tangible stuff. And Jupiter is not tangible. Jupiter is the intangible. It doesn't mean it isn't there. It doesn't mean it's not evolving. And it doesn't mean it can't or whatever. It actually means that the person needs to focus on the practices, not just the philosophies, and not the stress and worry of the world. And the hope that one day, I'm hopeful that I'll have enough money, or there's materiality, and one day I'll be able to practically get it done. And again, you see the negative qualities. If you're looking at a debilitation, you could have some of these negative qualities: cold, rigid, workaholic. Because Jupiter is getting some of the mostly getting the difficult qualities, let's say. So again, what you can find is that devotion to Guru. Because again, remember, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, where there's devotion. Devotion is the key. All Guru's grace and spiritual practice are really devotional practices, whether we know it or not. It's how much devotion you have, and it's not to the Guru like it's a person where you're worshiping at their feet in some kind of unempowered way. It's just simply love. How much do you love that thing? How much love do you have for that truth? And can you feel it in your heart? Not some rational, well, if I do this, I'll get this. And that's where Jupiter in the earth signs can get downgraded, because earth signs are very transactional. What mantra do I say to get the thing I want? or to get as much money as I want. And by the way, I'm not saying this necessarily about Jupiter and Capricorn. I've seen that be actually one of the most, where a person will actually really work hard on their spiritual practices, but they still need to do this. They still need to watch this because it's there. It's going to feel like this to them. Well, I'll do it. What am I getting back? Right? Like, not just to keep coming back to my case, but in mine, in Pisces, it's like you can't do it enough. Like, I wish that's all I was doing. I don't need to get anything back. I just want to give. Just give. Like, the fact that there are gurus and there's this wisdom and there's that is just the most amazing thing in the world. I don't need. What could I ever get back from that? The fact that it even exists is the most miraculous thing ever, that I can feel it and know it, right? So, but, this kind of range is also, again, like I said at the beginning, we can personalize it and make it out like, oh yeah, me, that's why I do this, and I'm these emotions and these feelings. Or we can go to that next level and realize, aside from that I'm not just these feelings and emotions, because we're not. That's in this lifetime, and it's the karma of this lifetime, and the karma of that thing to be evolving within that context. Because that's also just one thing. I also happen to know that Vaishnavi is Libra, so it's in the 4th house. And, the sun of Capricorn is a very powerful sign. So there's it doesn't change anything. Look, I've seen the charts of a lot of saints, and some of them, they have a lot of very difficult planets, debilitated planets all over the place and whatnot. So that's another thing, is that those pure channels are pure. And Jupiter and Capricorn, as an example, is definitely one where a person, once they get this, they can just concentrate. Capricorn is one of the most meditative signs there are. I mean, I'm really glad my Saturn is there. I mean, that's, also Mars is exalted in Capricorn, because we have the courage to, work through things in solitude. But Jupiter and Capricorn as well, taking Guru's teachings into that place of solitude, into the heart, is definitely very possible. Just like Venus in Virgo as well, like I said earlier, that debilitation is not so bad. So anyway, folks, that's what I got today. If there's no more questions, I'm going to go. I'm playing tennis today at 2, and my Mars and Leo is ready for it. I'm playing this guy who's 30 years younger than me, and I'm going to win. I'm going to bust him up like I always do. So we'll see you tomorrow at the same time at 11. And I'll also post a link to, I'll upload the PDFs from the first week and leave it at that. So you all have a great rest of your day.